If you're just joining us, I think we're going to wait a few more moments as people continue to join the room. All right, if you're just joining us, we're just waiting as people continue to join us. We will kick it off, and I'm sure we're going to have people joining us throughout. Just want to make sure we get the bulk of us in here with us. Thank you again for joining us. Right, they just keep coming. Give me just about one more minute, everyone. I apologize. Want to make sure that most of our group gets our instructions. All right. Okay, I will start it off. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Amelia Lochner-Malave. I am a staff member of the New York State chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. And I'd just really like to thank everyone for joining us to start the work tonight. I'm just going to go over a few administrative items and hand it off to our executive director and facilitators for the evening. I just want to give an introduction to Zoom. Please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking. This is going to open up into working discussion. So if you can, of course, unmute yourself when you would like to speak or raise your hand if we have high rates of participation. I also ask that you remain mindful that we'll be amplifying and centering the voices of BIPOC social workers tonight. So please keep that in mind as we do our work. This is not a CE event, so please be aware that this program will not hold any credit towards licensure. Our series for free CEs for our members is all anti-racism and all free for our members. If you are looking for CE content, just shoot us a question in the chat box and we'll be able to send you to the right place. That is all that I have. I'm going to hand it over to our executive director, Samantha Fletcher.
Good evening. Like Amelia said, my name is Samantha Fletcher. I'm the executive director of the New York State chapter of NASW. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us in this extremely important initiative that we're working on in revolutionizing the profession. I first want to start by thanking the partner that I've worked with for years in racial justice initiatives, Dawn Knight Thomas. Dawn, can you just say hi so people see you? She waved, but she's on mute. But I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for Dawn and the work we did and how she helped me grow as a person and worked with me all these years on this. And I just want to say that we started our work as mothers of Black sons, and it was really was the continued deaths that we saw of the Black community that launched us into our work several years ago. And I just want to say that, you know, just this week that, again, we have another shooting that we're mourning as a nation and as a people that, you know, one of our young brothers was shot in the back and he's now paralyzed. And at the same time, we also had, you know, a white man shoot the protesters, killing 2 of them and injuring 1 who were just protesting for rights. And we also have a social worker on. I saw her join us, Michaela, who has also been condemned and arrested for protesting for Black rights. So I hope that she speaks later when we open things up and you know, talks a little about her experience and helps us create these very important goals. So tonight we're working on revolutionizing the profession of social work. We started this initiative because of one of our members, one of our board members, Notion Hawk. Notion's here with us tonight, so hi, Notion. she really reached out, and there were some things happening that she didn't like, and she didn't like what she was seeing. And through conversations, we came up with this plan that, you know what, we have power, and we have power when we join together to make change. So that's why we're here tonight. And we started this journey almost 3 or a little over 3 weeks ago, when we acknowledged the historic racism in the profession, and we also heard the current racism in the profession. We heard from multiple BIPOC social workers who described the racism they face every day in schools of social work and in their places of employment. And I know that I left that meeting, and I just felt like it was such a powerful meeting. I actually had trouble sleeping that night because it was so powerful, and I just kept hearing the voices that spoke and thinking about the support that each one of those people had on this platform through chat, and everyone was backing them up. Through that experience, I know we can make change. So here we are. We're starting with the New York State chapter. We're going to be creating goals tonight. I want to thank Alex St. Laurent and Cecily Harper Mitchell. They are going to be facilitating this conversation, and we've met several times to discuss how it would go. And it was actually their decision to start with the chapter, because they said we can't ask other organizations to make change if we don't clean our own house first. And I couldn't agree more. We have to start with our own chapter. So when we talk about change, we have to talk about that change is hard. People don't like change. It's really difficult. And one of the reasons why it's hard is because we have to admit where we've been wrong, and we have to acknowledge that. So I think it's our nature that when someone tells us that you have perpetuated a system of oppression, it's our nature to deny that or to defend it or say, no, that's not what was really happening. I think the same thing happens when someone says that to us, that, you know, you've treated me, you've hurt me, you've acted racist toward me. That our first instinct is to deny. No, I didn't do that. That's not what I meant, and all that. And I think that we have to be aware of that. I think we have to be aware that that's what happens when we're faced with people saying to us that, you know, you've hurt me. This is how you're perpetuating things. So it's my promise to you, as one of the leaders of the New York State chapter, that you will not hear that from me. My job is to listen and to learn. And whether racist incidents happened before I was here or not, it doesn't matter, because I'm here now and I'm responsible now. So I want to hear what's happened to you, and I want to hear what goals we can develop from those experiences. I think it's really important also, when we're talking about this, to talk about this as two groups doing the work. The first group is the group who is oppressed. In this case, that's Black, Indigenous, Latinx communities, Asian communities, and essentially BIPOC social workers. That's the focus. Those are the people who have experienced racism in their personal lives and in the profession of social work. And I just want to acknowledge the strength that it takes to talk about your experiences, because you're talking about that in a mixed group, and there's a level of vulnerability with that. When you start to talk about, this is what has happened to me, you're being vulnerable, and we could not make the changes if you weren't doing that. So I want to acknowledge your strength, and I want to thank you for your strength, and I want to thank you for what you're contributing, because we don't have this movement without you. And not only that, you're leading it. This whole initiative will be led by BIPOC social workers every step of the way, from our facilitators to our small group leaders when we get to small working groups, in enacting those goals and enacting the steps to meet those goals. You have talked, especially starting with the first town hall, you've talked so intimately about what it feels like to face racism, what it does to every cell of your body when you are in that situation. And again, I just want to thank you for that, and acknowledge that we couldn't do this without you telling us about those experiences. The second group that is responsible for making change is people with white privilege. So white people and people with white privilege. So we have a role too. So what's our role during this town hall? Our role is to listen and learn. That's our role. So I hear a lot of time from white people who want to be allies. How do I be an ally? How do I find out about this? Well, there's lots of literature you can read about racism, but this is a great experience to sit back and listen to the experiences of BIPOC people and what they're telling you. It's also our job as people with white privilege that we have to acknowledge that we have oppressive systems. We have to acknowledge that there's racism that impacts systems and impacts people, and it impacts communities. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge how we have privilege in those systems. And that is part of this work. So when you're listening to the stories of people tonight and in future town halls, think about how you're treated in the same situations that they're talking about. So one thing that I like to say, you know, I have the privilege, as someone with white privilege, I have the privilege of no one ever accusing me of getting this position in ASW because of affirmative action. Several of my Black and brown friends have been accused of that. You know, I have a privilege. I have the privilege of, you know, just leaving my house in the morning and dressing however I want and getting in my car and driving to work and not having to fear being pulled over, not having to fear being followed. That's a privilege. So start to realize those areas in your life where you have privilege. We also have the job as people with white privilege to identify racism and call it out when we see it. So I really want you through these talks to start to develop what I call the third ear and the third eye. I actually got that from an older Black activist, uses that term, and I stole it from him. And what he means when he says that is in everything you do in life, you're always listening and looking with that third eye. So when you watch the news, how can you hear racism in that? When you're at the store, what are you seeing? Are you seeing incidents of racism? When you're at your work, how does systemic racism play out in your office? So we have to develop that third eye and third ear and constantly be on the lookout and speaking out when we see it. What we're not here to do as people with white privilege is to validate the experiences of BIPOC people. That's because to do that perpetuates white supremacy. So for us to say, oh yeah, I know that happens, you know, I've seen that happens, that means that white people have to validate the experience of BIPOC people. No, when BIPOC people are talking about their experiences, those are their experiences. It is racist. When they tell us this is something that happened to me and it was racist, that's what we believe. We don't need a white voice in that. All we need is the BIPOC voice. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that, that we're not trying to validate, that we're listening and we're learning. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me setting this up. That's all you'll hear from me tonight. And I wanted to hand it over next, before we get to the facilitated conversation, to Billy Jones. Billy Jones was the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at our chapter for 2 years. And she just did a phenomenal job. She built the committee, and she also worked with the committee to create some goals that were approved by our board in June. So I wanted to give her the opportunity to talk about the work that she did and some of those goals that you will be adding to tonight. So I'm gonna now hand it over to Billy. Thank you for joining us, Billy. Billy, you are on mute.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sam, for inviting me, and thank you for being supportive. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Diversity Committee and what the experience has been like over the past 2 years and some of the elements of the plan that you will be adding on. So I just wanted to say that when I started as the chair of the Diversity Committee, we started with absolutely no roadmap. The state chapter, sometimes like other organizations and programs, we say we're committed to diversity, but there's nothing behind it. So there was no chair and no members. There was a statewide call for committee members, and we started as a brand new group, no history, no institutional memory, and only one or two of us knew each other from before. It's a brand new group. And to this day, we have never even met in person, just phone calls and Zoom, right? And we managed to get a lot of work done. So in the beginning, when we started our work, we were really determined to work to make change at the state chapter. And we were also committed to looking at diversity, not just looking at race, gender, and gender identity, ability, and sexual orientation. We also wanted to look at the experience of students, newer social work professionals. We wanted to represent all practice areas, which there's a lot of. If you're in a different practice area, sometimes people feel that NASW doesn't represent them. We wanted to look at the dynamics in our larger cities, our small towns, our small counties and rural parts of the state that often feel like they don't get represented. And we are one of the largest chapters in the country. And that's a really heavy lift to get 10 or 11 people together and say, okay, figure out, right, how to help the chapter chart its course, but we did the best that we could. So one of the first tasks for us as a brand new group and collective with no history was really to define what diversity meant to us. And a lot of our work in the beginning, I would say almost a year, was really having a lot of difficult conversations about our own experiences in the profession, and talking about our experience in social work schools, nonprofit organizations, and even within NASW divisions. And I don't want to speak for specific committee members, but I can tell you that there was a general consensus that there was still an unbelievable amount of racism, discrimination, and bias in our schools, our organizations, and within our divisions. And we all agreed that we wanted to be a part of changing that. We shared, and Sam had listened in on a lot of those calls as the staff person who is staffs what we call staffing the committee, and is a very active member. But she really got to listen to the microaggressions that we've experienced, all the overt and covert experiences of racism and discrimination, and how difficult it was for many of us, as we're thinking about what happened with George Floyd, or a very racist incident at NYU social work school last year where I teach, and other things that happened in the field. We talked about that as a committee in real time and processed how we felt about that, the struggles with that, what we wanted to see change. One of the things that we also reflected on, and that's why I appreciate these forums, we also reflected on the reality is that it is the people who are treated so poorly, right, and experience the discrimination, are still willing to engage to make change. And I don't know if people realize what a feat that really is when you are at the end of so much. Me and another member joked, but we might really do it, so stay tuned. Me and another member joked a lot that we were just going to host an NASW webinar and just share all the terrible things that were done and said to us in organizations we worked in, and just have people listen to that. But as a result of these tough conversations, which ended up being very therapeutic, helped us cement each other, cement as a group, ended up being incredibly validating to feel like you're not, the only one who's having those experiences. Because the other thing we talked about is there has not been a place for a lot of us to process a lack of mentors, a lack of role models. So we did that for each other. But out of all of that, we created the diversity action plan, the diversity statement, and also worked on the first, and then the next one is next week, the Racial Justice Forum. So the plan is some of the basic tenets. I'm not going to get into the whole thing because I know the meat of what we want to do is tonight is in the conversation and setting the goals, but really looking at expanding educational content and making sure that we're providing training and content that is reflective of the needs of all social workers throughout this chapter and not just some. We developed the diversity statement that affirms our values as a chapter, right? We were very intentional about saying we don't sort of want a vanilla ice cream diversity statement. We wanted a strong affirmative statement that was clear that we were anti-racist, anti-sexist, right? I don't know, is it how available it is, but I know Sam will share that. I don't remember it all right now. We also talked about marketing and showing the diversity of social workers in the chapter. We also talked about how hard we work and we don't see ourselves reflected anywhere, right? Our leadership, our contributions, even, right, and just even NASW newsletters and things like that. Also the creation of a resource guide for members to include a bibliography, understanding key definitions such as racism, discrimination, microaggressions, intersectionality. And one of the reasons why we came up with that is that we talked about the burdens that many of us have had to experience of being maybe the few or the only person of color or the only who had to sort of explain to people that supervise us even, like what terms meant. So we thought about coming up with the guide because we felt like BIPOC social workers should not always be in the situation where they have to educate others and take on that emotional labor on top of our day jobs. We also want the job descriptions of staff and board members to include a commitment to diversity and inclusion, but also building in an accountability process for that, not just saying it, but really making sure that NASW chapter staff and the board are being measured on these outcomes. Also increasing outreach to underrepresented social workers in the chapter. The other thing that we reflected on is how many social workers have shared that they don't want to have anything to do with the organization because they feel like it doesn't represent them. They feel uncomfortable. They went to a terrible meeting, that somebody said something bad. They feel like that there's no place for them. So we talked about doing real outreach and trying to engage members who feel underrepresented. We also talked about researching and providing accommodations for social workers who are deaf and hard of hearing, blind, colorblind, thinking about our live seminars, how people engage with the website, how we give access to information. We had a deaf member who moved, but, you know, would hold us accountable all the time for, you know, whether we really care about disability justice, and really pushed us hard on that. The other thing we talked about doing is really raising money and creating a budget to implement accommodation. It's not easy, you know, the chapter office is what it is and we can't change it, but you know, if you, not everybody has access to it, right? And talking about being intentional about making those changes. Talked about phasing in changes to technology that makes it accessible for all members, and providing better accommodations for social workers who are differently abled and need accommodations in order to access chapter services and provide real advocacy. And even something as simple as when we have events in a location that you even include accessibility, like, is it accessible? What are the entrances? They're just things that, you know, we take for granted. So it was a starting point. We're hoping that you add to it. You know, we were very dedicated and tried to be, oh, there's a diversity statement. I didn't even notice that. Thanks, Sam, for posting that. And, you know, again, the diversity plan is a living document. We created it that way so it can change and grow as things change and as needs change. But, you know, I think it's important as we have these conversations is that there, you know, there have been very committed active members sometimes behind the scenes who may not get the recognition. So I think as we reflect and talk about revolution, it's important to acknowledge that some of us have been here for a little while too. And so what may feel like lack of progress, it's like, you know, it may be helpful to even ask what it was like when we started. With that being said, I have enjoyed my time on the diversity committee. I found it very powerful and wonderful, and I have appreciated all of it and my colleagues who are in this arena, no matter what is going on for us personally and professionally. And with that, I want to hand it over to Cecily and Alex, who are going to facilitate this meeting tonight. So please, you know, try to stay grounded and focused and engaged in the conversation as we set goals and seek to do better. So Alex and Cecily.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex St. Laurent. I am a recent Stony Brook University graduate of their Master's in Social Work program, and I am going to be one of your two facilitators tonight.
And good evening, everyone. My name is Cecily Mitchell Harper. I am so very happy to be here and just really excited to share the space with you. I'm a licensed social worker in the state of New York. I've been practicing for many years, have been doing evaluation, research, evaluation, clinical practice, and also facilitation, professional development. So I've been all over, and I'm just really, really excited to be here and just, you know, wanting to hold the space and wanting to uplift and acknowledge what's coming up and be a part of an organic process of setting goals and really thinking about how we can change because from pain comes change. So that's really it's where I am, and I'm just really, really excited to be here and co-facilitating with Alex this evening.
Yeah, a thoughtful examination of our practice as an association within individual social work organizations, institutions, different local agencies, and even as individual practitioners helps us reveal examples of subtle or overt forms of racism. And if we can understand the manifestations of these different forms of racism within our organization, our home at NASW New York chapter to start, we can gain a better understanding of these issues, discover strategies to work for change, and become authentic social change agents leading against the struggle of structural racism in a variety of different societal institutions that outstretch past our metaphorical four walls. Cecily and I are going to be facilitating the start of this analysis that I just described tonight. And I want you all to consider the scenarios that are going to be brought forth through conversation and through prompting when needed. So feel free to share your thoughts, your opinions, your personal experiences surrounding the notions that are going to be mentioned within the next hour, and any that come to mind naturally. So before extending any prompts, I wanted to open up the floor to see if anyone would like to start us off by offering a personal anecdote or a comment on how we can do better as a chapter.
My name is Andrea Harewood. I've been a social worker at my job right now for 35 years. And I would say since 2015, I have experienced a lot about, you know, racism. It got better, but now in the last year or so, it's gotten worse. I don't know how much NASW can help, but there's a lot of us who are senior workers who are at a point in our lives like, okay, we can leave, we can retire, but at the same time, you know, it's, as a fellow social worker, if you have an agency who doesn't support you, you know, it's like, where do you turn? So, I mean, I'm glad that we're doing this type of work and that we really try to help social workers. But I just try to figure out how can you really help those who are senior social workers who've been in the field for a long time, and as well as what legal is. That's what we like. That's what we all like to look for. What are the legal aspects? What can you do as an organization to support social workers?
Thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry that that is something that you had to experience. As a group tonight, I think our goals are to take examples of instances such as yours and formulate goals that we can put forth as a chapter in order to come up with more clear guidelines as to how to handle situations just like that. From what you're telling me and sharing with the group, it sounds like the chapter doesn't have accessible guidelines as far as we are aware at this time to what to do when a situation like that arises. Does anyone else in this group share the same sentiments?
No, I'm sorry. I mean, yeah, thank you for that. Again, for me right now. I'm the only LCSWR, and I'm Black. And recently they've all hired all white social workers, all MSW, but they utilize them more than me, who's been there. So it's like, again, relative support is, if I want to call up, say I need help with this agency because they're not supporting or they're not utilizing my credentials as they should. That's the thing. Who do I go to? That's the part I think we need to start at. It's like, who can you be directed to?
Right. Thank you. That's a great question. And someone in the chat just offered the ASWB as a possible solution to that. Has anyone else experienced any lack of support and not knowing where to turn in instances within your practice when it comes to experiencing racism?
This is Barb. I just wanted to add that it sounded like, and I'm getting clarification, but Andrea, it also sounded like you are the senior member. You're like the highest credential you can get, LCSWR, and you're Black. But then all of the newer social workers that are in subordinate social workers coming in are all white, which sounds like it's an imbalance now, because when it comes to mentorship and also just having the, balance or diversity within the profession at your place, it sounds like it's already going to not happen after you retire.
No, it's not. And rather me supervising those social workers, I have a psychologist who hasn't really renewed her stuff, but she's the clinical services director and she's in charge of all the social work, not me, but all those other social workers, and she's hired them. And she's white. I don't know, did I lose a connection?
No,
Okay.
I was giving folks a chance to respond if they wanted to.
I think we were all sitting with that very real and multiplied over many different places. Like that seems to be one of the prevailing situations. If somebody wanted to speak on that.
what I was going to say is we're all thinking, a little perplexed, but we know this happens. This happens a lot with BIPOC individuals not being treated fairly. I mean, she's a senior person, like you said, Barbara, and they're using other psychologists for the social workers. I mean, it's just racist. They're being racist. And that's what it is. It's just calling a person what's going on. We just need to speak it. But the other piece is, I'm like, okay, why don't we have, where should she go if she's experiencing, or any social worker is experiencing discrimination? And is it New York State Education Department? Is it getting, I know people may not want to deal with this, but in regard to getting counsel, sometimes you have to do lawsuits because people will do things and think they're getting away with it, and they know there's a grave injustice happening. And so where should she go? And that's the question on the table. Who can help her and other social workers who are going through this? Because I think that's going to be part of the policy that needs to be developed. As these things are happening, which we know they are happening in many different agencies, and people are isolated, alone, they don't have anybody to go to. We need to have a place that people can go to get the assistance that they need.
And so therefore, rather than turn to my organization, I do have a lawyer, and I am seeking, and I'm seeking to retire from that place, but I'm also seeking legal stuff. So, but the thing is, I tried looking through the whole website of the NSW as to certain questions in regards to that, but I found nothing. And that's what I'm talking about. And in order to help others, where can we go?
I just want to say I appreciate this conversation and what's coming up, because I think that this is exactly, as we're hearing the experiences, the personal experiences that people are going through, we know that this is happening. And we know that there are people who are not on this call who this is happening to and don't feel that they have a place to go and don't feel that they have support. So I think where we are right now is to really look at, okay, where's the area in the NASW, NYS chapter that has failed practicing social workers in this regard, and how can we seek to change that? And this is the very beginning process of that, of just acknowledging, and also acknowledging that it's not just, Andrea, thank you so much for sharing. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing that, but I also know that there's so many people probably on this call and also not on this call who are also experiencing that and who have experienced that. And the fact that it takes this to even just question, well, where can I go? What support do I have from NASW in this process is really important. So I just want to say, I just appreciate this conversation, and really this is really where we want to get to, is really thinking about, okay, we're acknowledging that we failed. And so how can we, what steps can we take to improve?
I guess I have a question. If I don't want to step on anyone's toes though, but I guess this is just like an open question, is if anyone's had like any sort in their agencies or within community organizing groups, if y'all have had any training that really feels like it ingrains these things in people, just because like I've had so many experiences where people have the language where they like understand the concepts, but then there's just this disconnect when it comes to applying it. So like probably one of the most like egregious examples I can think of is like one time I was working in family court, and we were talking about like trauma responses and how they can show up. And right after that, we had a client who was trying to avoid somebody who would like cause them harm. And they were honestly like, I don't want to move from the place that I am right now. And a lot of people in the office were like, oh my gosh. And like, this was a client of color. And everyone was like, why are they so difficult? Like, why are they so resistant? And it's like, we had just talked about trauma responses. But then like right after we had talked about that, we're calling clients resistant and difficult, and that it just clearly there's some sort of disconnect. Like we all have these, a lot of people, we get the language, we get the training, but then when it comes to seeing it and incorporating it, I'm just wondering like if you all have had trainings or culture shifts that you've seen that have really helped like ingrain those kind of, just like kind of ingrain it in the way that we treat people as colleagues or as clients. Yeah.
I could answer that question if that's okay.
Go for it.
I was in the last one. I am not actually from New York. I'm just kind of observing for my field hours, so I'm just lurking. But a lot of our trainings in school were like, here's a video. Hispanic people care about their food a lot, so you can't turn down their food when you go to their house. And like Muslim people will respond this way and this way. Black people will respond like this. And it's a very broad brush sweeping, like, Black people celebrate Kwanzaa. And I'm like, no, some Black people celebrate Kwanzaa, but they're like, this is Kwanzaa. So it was very much like that. And obviously that was like in one ear out the other, because it's like, I mean, I can look in this room and see like 6 Black people that I know for a fact don't celebrate Kwanzaa because we're friends. So what is this? So instead, what they started doing is having social workers from the field who were a member of that community come in and say, well, this is how I feel about certain things and how I tend to do things and how people I've worked with tend to do things. Here are some generalizations that we get wrong or that we just kind of assume. And if it's like a person coming in talking about themselves and a real life experience, it tends to stick better than those like generalized trainings of like a video of like, this white lady accidentally said something racist and she feels bad and how could she have done it better. Like, so I think getting more people to come in and speak rather than making these videos is super helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I know that our agency leads through the mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. And so we do training around intersectionality and how important it is to have cultural humility, because there isn't a monolith for anyone. And so understanding intersections and then creating a culture where when somebody speaks in a way that perpetuates racism or supremacy, where we call that person in and we don't let that go unnoticed. So that, I think, teaching those elements and then also in an ongoing daily way, calling each other and holding each other accountable, that's what I found to be helpful.
Definitely, yeah, like I guess that's a good point. Like it can't be a training, like it has to be like a consistent commitment to rethinking and reimagining the way that we're addressing a lot of this.
Can I add to that as well? I think that just like what you just said, it's so much more than just like trainings. Trainings are important, but it's personal work that needs to be ongoing, because what it is an unconscious or implicit bias, whichever you want to call it. So it's like, yeah, you can walk through a trauma response training and then people go out and still say things that they just learned was not okay to say, because this is something that they have internalized, they believe these thoughts, and this is their approach to certain groups. And so it is just like personal work that needs to happen. And oftentimes I think within social work, as much as we talk about like diversity in different groups and like working with different populations and different communities, I feel like people still just are reluctant to let go of certain biases or beliefs that they have. And that's like another issue that we have to deal with.
The other piece that comes to mind is making sure that policy matches the mission of anti-racism. We can't have policies that put people in boxes or don't eliminate barriers and just have rigid sort of responses. We have to have policies that eliminate barriers and raise up and empower. And so oftentimes our policies are grounded in white supremacy. So we have to come together, create committees and whatnot to ensure that our policies are even aligned with the very work that we're saying that we're doing.
Thank you everyone for sharing. And we've been only talking for a little bit, and we've already identified some really great goals here. So far from what I've gathered, we as a collective of individuals want to establish creating accessible guidelines for how we react to racist incidences within the workplace. We're also looking to advocate for the advancement of BIPOC social workers and organizations, and not putting BIPOC social workers in positions that they aren't qualified for. The story that was shared by Andrea is a perfect example of how this can go wrong. But I also can personally provide an instance in which it's the other way, or rather the other end of the spectrum, having someone who's very green on the field being put in a situation in which she's not qualified for. I had multiple instances of this while I was an intern getting my MSW, and I was put in situations in which I was put there because the client was Black, I'm Black, and the social worker that was supervising me felt that this was the best way to communicate the information that needed to be communicated. Meanwhile, the situation that I was handling was not something that I was taught how to handle yet. It was dangerous, and I did not learn from it except for what not to do. So I would be hard pressed to believe that this is the only instance in which this happens, but there really needs to be protection for social workers on both ends of their careers. I noticed that there were a few either current students or recent graduates that are here on the call. So if this is something that you've experienced, I can definitely, I want to give space for that if you would like to share yourselves.
I'm also, like Gretchen, I am not from New York. I'm calling from Virginia. Before I dive into like my story as well as what you're talking about, I want to thank your chapter so much for the solidarity that you've shown me, and for the other protesters and social workers who are out here on the front lines. I really like that story that you have brought up because I'm a recent graduate. I just got my BSW, and I remember when you were filling out, what populations you would like to serve. I had specifically put in the bottom children. I know I had a lot of childhood trauma I haven't worked through, and I knew that I wasn't fit to be working in a space with children. And my school did not really acknowledge that, put me in a YMCA for a summer camp. And sorry, I saw that you can't hear me. Can everyone else hear me? Okay. Talk up more. Okay. Is this loud enough? Sorry. Yeah, so I was put in a YMCA, and there was not a social worker on site to supervise me. They had never had a social worker there, and a lot of the children that they saw were from from economically disadvantaged communities, predominantly Black and Brown, and I was just put in this space to be kind of the social work savior, and I wasn't qualified for it at all. And I had, practically begged to be placed elsewhere because I knew it was harming me, and I knew that I was potentially harming the children by not being qualified to address their needs. So I think about that a lot in terms of education because, I'm just entering my career field. what the schools could be doing better to be listening to their social work students. And of course, centering, you know, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those voices as well. Because when we say, hey, we really are not able and to be in this space, it needs to be valued. So thanks for holding space to share kind of those experiences.
Thank you, Michaela, for speaking to that. I can personally, I've been through something very similar in a field placement where I felt that I had to advocate, and feeling like, you know, as a Black student, just feeling like my voice was not being heard and I had to keep on speaking up. And one of the pieces that you're getting at is what's happening in social work education. What's happening as we're training students, particularly in field placements. What happens in field placements, what happens in internships. That's going to be, we're going to be having future town halls, and that's going to be one of the topics that we're going to be specifically looking at. So thank you for uplifting that, because I know that it also comes up. I've had personal experience with that, and I'm also a field instructor, and so I see this and am aware of these issues. So I just want to say that we will be having future town halls where we're actually going to be looking specifically at that piece as well. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And listening to another example made me realize, and having Cecily provide the connection to social work education reminds me how interconnected these problems can be, which is why as a chapter, we can't just address one. We have to, by addressing one, we must address them all. So I really encourage everyone to not only personally partake in our future town halls, to be part of the solution, but to spread the word to your other fellow social workers, because that's the only way change is going to be truly accomplished, if we get it at the root, and we can't ignore one facet of where this problem stems from. We have to get all of it, and we have to get it all out together. So thank you for everyone that shared so far. We've had some pretty concrete next steps already established. And if there are no other points to be made in terms of continuing treating, I have a prompt, or rather a quote, that I would like to bring up to the group to see if it prompts any discussion. So if you are all following the NASW New York's chapter on Facebook, you would have seen that there was a series of graphics that included quotes on them that came directly from our members regarding experiences that they have had in terms of racism and how it intersects with our chapter, social work education, practice, on both the micro and the macro end. And one quote that I thought was particularly poignant to this group was the following. Membership is an even greater barrier for BIPOC social workers who make less than their white colleagues. I wanted to bring this conversation up because as we sit here and we talk about ways to make change, a lot of that change I have found was accomplished through being involved directly with our chapter and being part of the committees, which you can only do if you're a member. So would anyone like to start the discussion on how they feel that membership is a greater barrier for BIPOC social workers?
Hi, my name is Osha, and I do agree with that statement that the membership dues are very steep. And I know for myself, although I was able to afford it, I was hesitant to pay that because I just was wondering what the benefits would be to me in paying that dues. And when you look at, I think yesterday was Women's Equality Day, and you look at the wage gap disparity with women, particularly women of color, you do see that, you know, paying that amount for membership dues and maybe, doing the cost benefit analysis, and it may not level out to you saying, hey, this is something worthwhile, this is something that's beneficial to me. So I can understand why people will make that statement and make that argument.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on here that it was absolutely, I agree, it was absolutely valuable that I was a part of NASW when I was a student. And at that time, the student fees are pretty reasonable because they were very reduced. And then when you're first couple of years in the field, it's a little bit higher, but not as much as it is if you're a full-fledged, like career person. So, but because of the type of salaries that we seem to be getting, the value that's been placed or not placed on social work careers, it does get to be something that you have to seriously evaluate. And hopefully with all of what we're doing right now, and this is why I'm really excited, is that there've been more movement about really, speaking up for ourselves as a profession, that we will create the momentum to have the value built in. And then also, hopefully, maybe those fees can be adjusted to account for the salaries, or to scale it according to income or something better than where we have it right now.
Would there be a way to spread the cost, like whether it's monthly or quarterly?
Do you want me to answer that? Alex and Cecily. So that's a great question, Caroline. And so right now, just so you know, we don't set that at the chapter. National sets that
Right.
membership dues. But I know Notion, you're on this call. Do you want to speak to that and what you're wanting to try to do about that?
Hi, everyone. So this was actually something that I, as a student, was also concerned about, because as a student, even the student membership $60 fee is really high. Now, as students, especially low-income students who are just working, struggling to pay college tuition, all of that, paying $60 at once is really difficult. It was really difficult for me. So actually, at our next board meeting, I asked Sam and Michael to put into our agenda to send a letter on behalf of the board and the New York State chapter on finding a new payment plan or a different way to make the membership fee more accessible. So $60, if you break it up in across 12 months, is $5 a month. Even if someone may not be able to pay $60 all at once, someone could be able to pay $5 a month. And then you break it up into the other levels of membership fees. But I know that National is the one that determines it, but I think a really strong letter from us, and obviously with everyone's concern here, it gives us a lot of power or just more support for this notion. I don't know if that was explained well.
To me, it was, and if I could add to that, I'm a member of NASW. I've been a member for 5 years. I serve on the National Ethics Committee, even though I'm the first one to criticize NASW. I see it as harm reduction, and that's why I'm here. And why I'm changing my membership to New York State, because I see that New York State is doing the work that most aligns with my values. But to what everyone else is saying, I think that we have to remember that NASW is a membership organization, and so they have to respond to their members. We have 76 people here, and I'm pretty sure that we can get that number really, really up. And I understand how this is important. My dues are I have to pay them next month because I have to renew. And if it wasn't because I serve on the ethics committee, which I think is really important, I really wouldn't renew it. But yeah, so just to say that there's power here, and I really think it's a great idea. And I also think that that letter can be shared with other chapters. I personally know people in the New York City chapter that I could share it with, and same thing in New Jersey. Let's do this. I'm all in.
I mean, I think it would increase membership, you know,
Absolutely.
because it'll make it a lot more affordable. You know, my dues are already are due like October, and I'm thinking of ways of, oh, I need to put some money aside. You know, I have to start kind of budgeting for this right now. So, you know, it is a lot, and you know, especially what we're going through, you know, economically, you know, in this country. I think we have a lot of leverage.
Yes, absolutely.
And also too, with the membership dues, I think it impacts the diversity of the actual body of the membership. I think that there are a lot of Black and brown social workers who want to be involved more actively, but they just can't afford it. And so what happens is the membership then looks like the organizations that we work for, where the leaders are all white, and then you have the Black and brown people feeling like, here we go again. So it you know, I guess we would have to look at the whole picture, because just like the gentleman just said, we need to look at what the membership looks like in order to gain an increase in more diversity without the organizations on the state level, local level, to help balance out what we experience as an overall profession, I think.
I would like to pitch in and just say that, like, I also think social work in general as a profession is just really hard to get into. Like, you finish and you get your degree after paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and almost thousands of dollars in textbooks. Then you have to do your licensure exam, which is about $100, and every time you fail, you have to spend another $100 to take it again. Plus, you have to get your background checks, and then you have to pay for them to actually send you the license. Then if you want to join an organization like the NASW, you have to pay those fees. Then everyone tells you, well, you need a master's to actually do anything. So then you're doing your master's, and while you're doing your master's, you're expected to work 24 hours a week unpaid. You're paying to work those 24 hours a week. Plus you have to drive there, pay to park if you're in the city. Then you also have to do your schoolwork, and then most of us have to do an actual job to pay to do our unpaid labor for more times a week. And then you get to do your MSW exam, where you pay every time you get it wrong, and then you pay the licensing fee to get the MSW. So at that point, if you've already thrown all this money at this thing that has made it clear that it doesn't want you here with the way you've been acting, like I have never joined an NASW because I just graduated, like a national association, and seeing their behavior the past couple of months, I don't want to. I'm going to be very honest. And I know the Ohio chapter has been a little bit better than average, but I'm still just like, I don't know if I want to give them what little money I'll be making at this point.
Wow, you dropped the mic, Gretchen.
Yeah, very, very good point. And then add, after you do all of that, you're only gonna make $40,000 a year, right?
And if
so
you ask for more, they're like, well, you don't get into social work for the money. And I'm like, you
Exactly.
get into the profession for the money.
Exactly.
That's what a profession's for.
I think when we start looking again, like the way that we're perpetuating harmful systems, we have to look at, like, this is essentially capitalism. This is us doing all of this labor and getting nothing in return and no one caring. You know, we're continuing to push, and we want to have some sort of like financial liberty, which should be granted to everyone. But we're told, no, you have to keep giving us more money. You have to keep giving us more money for the bare minimum. So what does it say about us when we're trying to talk about dismantling systems, but then we're telling our future social workers, like, go ahead and be part of that system as well, you know?
And I just want to add that those licensing fees are a huge stumbling block. I just had a conversation with a recent social work graduate, and she was asking me, you know, what are the benefits of getting licensed if I want to do macro social work? And I was honest with her. I said, the only benefit is that people will put respect on your name. And I understand you graduated and you got your MSW, and it's not fair. It's not fair, but we are a profession, in my opinion, that's still struggling to find its identity. And as a result, we kind of follow behind the field of psychology, and we want to put all these letters behind our names, and it takes away from those who are able to do really good work, but somewhere along the line, they kind of get dismissed because they don't have an LMSW, they don't have an LC, or they don't have an R, but they're great social workers. So I think, like everyone else said, Gretchen and Michaela, you guys hit it right on the head. We're perpetuating harmful systems.
Thank you, everyone who just shared. I'm, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a recent graduate, so I felt every single word that y'all said to my core. I just paid for my licensing exam. I'm a current pseudo future macro practitioner. So I understand the struggle of trying to decide whether or not I should get the licensing exam, get the license, get my L. But something that, as I was having the same debates and thoughts that all of you were having, especially when it comes to what you mentioned, Michaela, about perpetuating a harmful system to folks who come from the same communities that I come from, is that as social workers, yes, by actively participating and paying expensive dues, we are perpetuating a system that can continue to exist and alienate those who can't afford it. But we're also becoming part of an organization, of a small chapter that has a specific spot at a table to make a difference. Something that I learned when I started getting more involved with NASW is everything that our chapter has to offer its members, which is unique to New York. The dedication that I learned that the board members and those involved in committees have for the work that they actually do. So then I got involved, and I realized that I had the power to affect change in communities, for the same communities that are being alienated by the high cost of membership through different policy changes that I'm helping to enact. So it's one of those things that is not great. I understand that things cost, but things cost for a reason. So for those of us who are able to be in the, to climb over that hurdle and put ourselves in a position to make change, I implore all of you to do so, so that we can all collectively work towards a world in which it's better for all folks, no matter SES status, no matter racial background.
I'm going to speak from an older person perspective. And I was part of back in maybe 2004 when they decided to grandfather a lot of us to get an LCSW or MSW. And we came far, but yet I don't think we came as far as we should be, because we're not still and pay salary as our counterparts. There's other professions that get named right off the bat. Social workers are still being associated with, even my job, as being just a plain counselor and not even as what your credentials should be. So again, I remember back then how we fought to get it. And I have colleagues, I've had I've supervised students where they're like, what's the sense of getting my master's or going through the LCSW, because it's like the we 1 minute and it says 6 years, oh, you have to go through this to get your LCSW, but then it changes, and there's a lot of frustration in regards to getting credentials, getting a lot of things, and some people just give up and say, you know what, I might as well just be this, or they'll find a way to use social work skills but not in social work. So that's what I'm talking about, the whole thing, not only racism, but it's a whole lot of things going on.
I agree. And I think people should also remember that in ESW, like all of these roles are filled by members, and these are elected positions. Any one of us could be on the board. I think we are at a time where we're all kind of experts in politics because we watch political campaigns and we watch how things are doing. We can replicate all of this and build each other up. I don't want to take credit for anything, But I think that there's a shift in national that has happened within the past couple of months. It's not great. It's getting there, hopefully, and that's because the thing I do is I put little fires everywhere, and there's if you see it, if you're a member of NSW, you want to go on the forum. Listen, my name is Machuca. It's easy to see. You can see I'm causing trouble all the time. I'm the first one to call people out and stuff. But we have a lot of people here that I know. All of us are capable of doing the work, and we all have voices. We all have power. And as we talk about what it is that we're going to do going forward, this is something that we should consider. The people that are already inside, how do we build them up and put them in leadership positions? And not just put them there, but like actually do the work. And it's from my experience within NESW, things aren't given to you. You fight for them, you demand them. And I'm willing and able and ready to talk to anyone that cares about starting little fires everywhere. And just honestly, this is the New York State chapter. This is in national. This is the New York State chapter. And we can replicate this at a national level. And imagine the power we will have as a profession if we have an organization that has 150 something thousand members that does this kind of work.
Yeah.
So
yes, the movement has to come from the bottom up. There has to be a dialogue, and there is an enormous amount of strength in numbers. So I think that's an empowering just right there, knowing that that we can come together, with one voice and ask for things. Explain what it is, and what we need, and ask for things. I mean, I think that's maybe the liberating thing of shifting power is by being able to kind of have this conversation. And so and I think that's an excellent point that you made. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I think we're all at the tipping point of like every system everywhere, because I thank you, Luis, for saying that, because I can right now think right off the top of my head that maybe many of us know people in other states that we could like right now that we know that are ones that can do fires and quite effectively, and so that we can actually band together, because I think what we've been doing as a profession is being like kind of nice, and I've been guilty of this in my own life, where it's like you're very polite and respectful, and that you ask for what you want and stuff, when you advocate in your dulcet tones and stuff, and then nothing happens. So, but then now and then when you start becoming, the loud, angry, a Black person or person of color, then that's when it seems to be that things start, oh, okay, geez, we weren't aware that there is a problem. I guess we're going to have to now talk about it and maybe, do some things about it. So I think that this is where we're at right now. Like, okay, I don't, let's do it. We got thousands and thousands of people already that are members, but they are looking for, every social worker is looking for a place where can we matter? If I say something here at this meeting or at this place, at this, am I going to have not only my voice count, but am I going to have people behind me backing me? Hey, how am I going to feel that? What's that going to look like? And so I feel like NASW, like you said, Luis, I hope that this is now the momentum for the agent, for the organization, to really start knowing that they should be at the forefront of being the advocate for all the social workers, period.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for all who's contributed so far. There was something mentioned in the chat that I wanted to call attention to. Michaela said it. She talked about how, I'm just going to quote it directly, those who are able to afford membership should not be the only ones heard. Same with those in higher degrees. It is easy to listen to those who are more palatable rather than those who are in the raw struggle. And I fully resonate with that. As a recent graduate, as someone who's just finding herself within her career, especially someone who wants to practice macro social work, I constantly find myself surrounded by people with a lot of letters behind their name. And it's intimidating. Even in the beginning of this call, I was intimidated by the amount of folks with experience and stories and what do I have to offer. But it's by putting myself in this space and challenging myself that I'm able to advocate for recent graduates and students and other social workers in positions just like me. It's reason that I was able to form a connection with social workers like you all the way in Virginia. It's why membership to the NASW is crucial. And while it's not perfect, it gives folks who understand, who have roots within communities who are not necessarily heard, a direct line of communication to see that real work is being done, change is being achieved on behalf of their people, which speaks to the importance of getting involved if we are able to help alleviate the plight of those who are not. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important part of it. When I started at NASW, I started on the Code of Ethics Task Force that included language about technology in the code. And it was little me, I hadn't even graduated, and 6 other people, everyone with PhDs and law degrees. However, they may have had those degrees. They don't know technology like I know technology. They don't know social media like I know social media. There is always something that we bring to the table because all of our experiences are valid. And we are in a profession that is about feelings, right? The way that you feel is not the way that I feel about something. And so it doesn't matter how many degrees you got, how many years you spent in school, how many years you've been practicing, we all have something to offer, something to bring to the table. And to that point, I'm currently talking to National about doing a youth-led town hall on Facebook, and that is the kind of thing that I think NASW should be doing. This kind of space shouldn't just be for us, and I mean that in the sense that we are doing this kind of work, and there's people that are doing labor organizing, there's people that are doing real civic engagement, not just voting in November, but keeping that going and teaching people how budgets are formed and how we elect judges. It's when this social work is not dog eat dog. When we win, we all win. And so never be afraid of being in a space because someone else has some letters after their names. Getting the letter is easy. Being and feeling and living is the hard part. And we all do that. So we all have something to contribute to the conversation. I'm done now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just have to say, I'm just loving this. I'm scanning back because I'm just loving this conversation. And it reminds me, the first town hall that we had, we were discussing the history, right? The history of the profession, and just the even fact that, you know, we had to become a profession. So certain things kind of got lost. Certain work that we're doing, that we know we're doing, it doesn't matter what degree we have, it's happening. And so I think we need to be uplifting that because yes, we are a profession, and you know what comes with profession, licensure, this, that, and the third, but there's a whole history behind that. There's a whole history why we decided, oh, we have to be a profession to be somehow respected and recognized, but that's respected and recognized within you know, a country that's rooted in white supremacy. So how can we break out of that and see ourselves, yes, as members of a profession, but at the same time, we bring something to the table that's going to actually change and go back to a way that it should have been in the first place. And this is how it starts. So I just want to say I'm super excited because this is exactly the conversations that we're having here, is to be able to provide that momentum to see, okay, yes, there's limitations in the profession. We know that. We're acknowledging that. We've acknowledged that. We are going to continue to acknowledge that. But change is happening, and it happens right now. This is an organic process. and it will just continue to happen. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are at a tipping point, Barbara. I feel like we are. And Luis, thank you just for everything, and just everyone for uplifting everything that you're saying. This is where it starts, and I'm just really excited to be part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this conversation reminds me of a book that I'm reading right now called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's brilliant, and I'm not done with it yet. But from what I've gathered so far, it is the job of communities to use the authority that they've gathered from being directly involved in the plight and to be and being oppressed to find the solution. It cannot be the job of the oppressor, which is why it's so crucial that we have Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks in positions in which they can enact change. It's why it's important to have folks with a little bit like less letters behind their names in positions to have influence. Yes, Luis, I completely agree. It should be a required reading. It's the foundation for a new wave of thinking. It's why all of you should come back to our next town hall, especially those of us that have that fire already brewing, because like Michaela had mentioned, a lot of little fires can start a wildfire. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. It is 7:21. So I want to open the floor up to some closing thoughts. I could sit here and talk to all of you for hours, but it is a Thursday night, so I don't want to keep you. So would anyone else like to add anything before we conclude?
I would like to chime in. So I'm coming from a healthcare and business background, but I'm a first-year MSW student at the University of Albany, and I'm also part of the NSAW committee, New York State chapter, and I'm part of the AGR committee. I view the membership as an investment because I come into social work with a purpose. Healthcare, very rarely do you have these platforms to speak like this. It's very rare. It's silent. Whether you go through racial inequalities, it's quiet. You just go on with your job and you move forward. And I believe that the field of social work, especially in this time, it's a powerful force once everyone unites together. And I'm a novice to the profession, but I'm excited and to move forward. And I'm so glad for this town hall. I saw the email of a reminder. I was like, oh, I need to get on this call. So I appreciate everyone's input and to be, in a sense, candid and relaxed about situations that are so heavy, but you're not the only one going through certain situations. So I appreciate NASW, though I hear there was a unfortunate history. I look positive to move forward and make a change.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yes, thank you. Would anyone else like to share anything?
My last thing and I'll stop talking, I promise. I think one thing that is really hard for a lot of younger social workers, because I know a lot of you have like a lot of experience in the field, a lot of us who are just now getting out of school and getting in there are feeling super discouraged because we've been radicalized for 4 years and then the NASW calls us trolls, basically. So I think something that we all need to remember, and I want everyone to remember, is nobody loves social work more than those who are willing to critique it. And like, we wouldn't all be here yelling at them if we didn't care. So like, just, I'm low-key frustrated I don't live in New York because I want to join you guys and just like do all of this, but like, it's just reminded me, like, keep with it. Like, there's obviously people who care about social work as much as you do because you guys are having these town halls. So yeah, thank you for opening this to everyone, because I would have never heard this, and I honestly probably would have ended up burnt out in like 3 years and just left the profession. So knowing that there are people who want to change it this bad is really like reigniting that fire.
Okay, yeah, I love all of this fire that we got going here. Little fires, big fires. I do. We don't have to address this now, but like moving forward and like the future ones, I really, with all these calls, like maybe you all have already addressed this, but like with all these calls for social workers to replace police, I'm really looking forward to conversations about like how we as social workers already often perpetuate these systems, and we are like soft police already a lot of the time. So like I said, I'm new to NASW, and so like I'm looking forward to like how we can challenge these systems, because it looks like the fire's there, so now we just gotta like get together and start challenging everything that's happening. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. We have time for one more if someone would like to share.
And then I'll close out just because I want to add something. So someone else talk and then I'll close out.
All right, I'll say something. This is Dawn. This has been a great conversation. And when we do our workshops, we always say lean into the discomfort. This is going to be a ride that people better be ready for, because to activate change the way it needs to be within agencies and on every systemic level, there's going to be pain. But we have to stand strong as social workers. We know what needs to be done. We've cried the tears. We've gotten angry. We're tired of being sick and tired, like Fannie Lou Hamer said. So get ready. Don't back down. We're coming together as a force, as a collective, and we're going to make the change that needs to be done. Because I wish this was done years ago. I won't tell you how long ago, but many years ago when I was in graduate school, sometimes suffering through those classes. And so Sam Cooke said, change is going to come. The change is today. So thank you. It's nice to meet all of you. And I'm ready.
Thank you, Dawn. Dawn's my partner, so you got to see her like right after me. I worked with her for years. Thank you, my dear. Okay, so I'm loving the comments. No requirement to lead one of the work groups. Okay, let me kind of start at the beginning because I'm mid-sentence and mid-thought. So let me just say, these initiatives are open and free to everyone. Amelia put the website in the chat box. It's under our Black Lives Matter on our webpage. The only thing there's a charge for are some of the continuing education. So all of the anti-racism continuing education is free for New York State members, and 3 of them will be free for everyone. And the reason we have to do that is because we are still a business. So we just can't make all our trainings free for everyone, because we have to pay presenters and we have costs for running those. But aside from the education component, everything else on our Black Lives Matter initiatives are free and open to everyone, members, non-members, members of other chapters. And also leading these initiatives is open to anyone. Someone asked, is there a requirement? We want that. The requirement is that it's a BIPOC social worker, because these initiatives will be led by BIPOC social workers. And our white allies, our jobs are to fill the committees and help do the work and support the leaders. That's our job. That's where we can really step in as allies, is to do the work, to make these changes and to keep listening and learning. And I want to think, so someone had mentioned, I think Michaela Brown had mentioned, I just saw one of your comments about like how we perpetuate oppression. I think you were talking about like that, like how social workers can perpetuate oppression. I encourage you to join Evelyn Williams in her action part of our, and all our names for all our groups gets confusing. So Evelyn really focuses on the policies. So she's done 3 sessions now. She calls it her Act Now campaigns. all 3 sessions have been the history, because she said we can't start talking about policy change until everyone understands how racism has existed in the United States and how we got here. So she spent 3 sessions catching everyone up on that. The next session in September is when the work starts. And she's going to see what work groups people want to work in. Are you interested in changing schools? Are you interested in changing criminal justice? Are you interested in changing the medical field? So that's going to be really looking at how we change policies. This group is, we're revolutionizing the profession by creating goals that, if these goals were true, the way I always think about it is, what would an equitable profession look like? So if we were racially just as a New York State chapter, what would that look like? And we developed 3 goals from what you were talking about tonight that we're going to add to our existing goals, and we'll send those out to you. And some of the work groups will help us on creating the steps to enact those goals at New York State chapter. Our next town hall, I'm going to meet with Alex and Cecily and other people who are interested. We'll figure out what we're going to focus on the next town hall. I've put the link in a couple of times. It's in September 29th at 6, right? Is that what we said? Yes. So we sent the link in, so go ahead and register, and then we'll let you know what it's about. But it's going to be either schools of social work or practice. And Alex and Cecily had talked about like focusing maybe on macro practice and clinical practice. Now, when we get into these, we may have to do 2 or 3 for each one, because we may have so many goals that it may take 2 or 3 town halls, but this is a marathon. We're in this, we're committing, we're going to put the work in. It took thousands of years to get here. It's going to take a little time to get out, but as long as we're taking one step in front of the other and marching out, we're going to do it. We're going to make the changes. So I hope I answered everything. Amelia just put our info. If you want to lead, email us at our info.nasw New York State. Oh, it's naswnys@socialworkers.org. Email us there. I'm keeping a list of people who want to lead groups. So some people I've volunteered on the list, like Dawn. I already told her that she's volunteering. But yeah, send an email. We're keeping a list. And then that way, when we start to create these work groups, you can facilitate or co-facilitate those work groups. We want you to, to have that opportunity to lead and make the change. And I just want to thank you all. I thank you for sharing so openly and honestly again tonight. It's so powerful to listen to you. I really appreciate it. And I said I was going to talk last, but I think Alex and Cecily should take us out tonight. Thank you, ladies. You did a beautiful, beautiful job.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. It was an honor to facilitate this conversation, co-facilitate this conversation with Cecily. I'm more inspired to do the work that I hope to do in the future and in working to get done now. I encourage all of you who are residents and members of New York State to get involved with the chapter, join committees, attend these events, network, get to know your fellow social workers because there's power in numbers and we're going to change everything.
And I just want to say thank you. It has truly been an honor just to be part of this space, to share this space with you all this evening. This is how change starts. We are seeing it right now. And this is an organic process and it's going to continue. Something is happening that we can't ignore. It's happening, it's going to continue. And yes, there's going to be pain. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tiring. But we're here, and there's power in numbers, and there's power in momentum. So let's just keep with that. And so I just thank you all for your energy, for your passion, for all of it. I leave inspired and am really thankful to be able to share this space with Alex. Alex, you're already doing great work, so I'm not going to say you're going to be doing great work because you're already doing it. You do have a lot to offer. So I just want to give props to you and just really thank you all. Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Billy, for talking in the beginning about the history and kind of the work that has already been done and kind of where we're moving from, right? Moving towards and how we're starting out. So I just want to say thank you all. It's truly, truly been an honor to be here. And I'm looking forward to future ones because there's a lot to talk about.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.